I was raised to believe there was a logical explanation for everything. My mother never entertained stories about ghosts, angels, psychic abilities, or anything paranormal. In our house, there was no such thing as supernatural events. If something strange happened, there was always a rational reason behind it. That belief stayed with me throughout my childhood, and for the most part, I never questioned it. When I was around 11 or 12 years old, my paternal grandfather went into the hospital for what everyone described as a minor heart procedure. The adults around me were confident he would be fine. The surgery went well, and we were told he had even woken up afterward. As far as I knew, there was no reason to worry. Nobody was preparing for bad news, and I certainly wasn't expecting any. The next morning, I was sitting in school around 7:30 in the morning. Without warning, I suddenly felt an overwhelming certainty that I was about to throw up. It wasn't ordinary nausea. I didn't feel sick before that moment, and I wasn't dealing with a stomach bug. I simply knew that I needed to get to a bathroom immediately. I jumped out of my seat and ran before I even had time to explain myself to the teacher. I made it to the restroom and got sick. Afterward, I went straight to the school office. I told the secretary what had happened and asked her to call my mother so she could come pick me up. At that point, I thought I was just dealing with some random illness. Nothing about the situation seemed connected to my grandfather or the hospital. When my mother arrived and started driving me home, she seemed distracted. After a few minutes, she said she had planned to wait until school was over to tell me something. But since I was already with her, she might as well tell me now. Before she could continue, I interrupted her. I said, "Don't bother, I already know." The strange part wasn't just the words, it was the feeling behind them. Even years later, I have difficulty explaining it. It didn't feel like I was making a guess or trying to be clever. It felt as though someone else was speaking through me while I watched from a distance. I could still think my own thoughts, but I couldn't stop the conversation from happening. My mother looked confused and slightly annoyed. She told me there was no way I could know because the phone call had come after she dropped me off at school. Again, before she could continue, I said, "You don't have to tell me. I already know." Inside my head, I was completely lost. I remember mentally arguing with myself. I wanted to know what she was talking about. I wanted to hear the news like any normal person would. Instead, the words kept coming out before I could stop them. My mother became frustrated and told me to stop interrupting because she needed to explain something important. That's when I said the sentence that changed everything. "It's okay. I already know that Granddad is dead." The moment those words left my mouth, I felt shocked. Internally, I was screaming. I hadn't been told anything. Nobody at school had spoken to me. There had been no warning, no message, and no reason for me to believe my grandfather had died. My mother's reaction was immediate. She jerked the steering wheel so hard that the car nearly went into a ditch. She stared at me and shouted that I couldn't possibly know that. I remember simply shrugging and looking out the window. Even that didn't feel like my own reaction. It felt detached, almost emotionless. Later, I learned what had happened. My grandfather had died around 5 o'clock that morning. My aunt and uncle had called my mother shortly after to tell her. The timing was what disturbed me most. The phone call came at almost exactly the same time I became sick at school. For years, I tried to make sense of it. I never felt as though I had seen a vision or dreamed about my grandfather. There wasn't a ghost standing at the end of my bed. There were no mysterious lights or unexplained sounds. All I knew was that somehow I had stated a fact that I should not have known. As I got older, I occasionally asked my mother about that day. She never liked discussing it. Most of the time she would change the subject or refuse to answer questions. It was obvious that the memory made her uncomfortable. Eventually, after enough persistence, she admitted that she remembered the conversation exactly as I did. She confirmed that I had said those things before she told me the news. Then she added something that only created more questions. With visible irritation, she said, "Your grandmother knew things too." She was referring to her own mother. Naturally, I wanted to know what she meant, Did my grandmother predict events? Did she have similar experiences? Had something like this happened before in the family? Every question I asked was met with silence. My mother made it clear that the discussion was over. To this day, I don't know what happened in that car. I still believe most events have reasonable explanations. I still approach extraordinary claims with skepticism, yet that experience remains one thing I have never been able to explain. Maybe there is a perfectly logical answer that I simply haven't discovered. Maybe it was an incredible coincidence, or maybe there are rare moments in life that don't fit neatly into the categories we create for them. I was raised believing there was no room for anything unusual in the world. Most of the time, I still think that's true, but every now and then, I remember that morning, and I find myself wondering whether there might be a little more to reality than we understand.